Hey, listeners, if you haven't joined Stitcher Premium yet, now's the perfect time. Stitcher Premium gets you completely ad-free episodes of hundreds of shows like Comedy Bang Bang, WTF with Mark Maron, and How Did This Get Made? You also get 21,000 hours of exclusive content. New exclusive originals like Marvel's Wolverine and Issa Rae's Fruit are launching every week for Stitcher Premium members. If you love podcasts, you are missing out. When you listen to ad-free episodes in Stitcher Premium, your favorite podcasters get paid. Help support your favorite shows and join Stitcher Premium today. For a free month of listening, go to StitcherPremium.com and use promo code POCKET. Once again, StitcherPremium.com, promo code POCKET, and we thank them for supporting the Pocketnow Weekly. We are live. Are we finally done with the Samsung versus Apple lawsuit? The payout? The back and forth between the courts. Also, did Apple know about iPhone 6 problems like touch disease and Bendgate? Andy Rubin is going to dump the Essential 2 phone, and we're going to talk about the HTC U12. Can HTC mount a comeback? While we also have breaking news on the state of ZTE. We've got a lot to talk about, so make sure you're charged and ready for episode 306 of the Pocketnow Weekly. Recorded May 25th at 10 a.m. Pacific, this weekly podcast is where we dissect and discuss those gadgets that make our lives mobile. Smartphone, tablets, and wearables. It's all the stuff you wished existed when you were a kid, and a phone wasn't quite an essential piece of your daily lifestyle activities. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, contributing editor at Pocketnow.com, joined as always by plucky podcast producer Mr. Jules Wong. Once again, made it through the spiel, fumbled on your name.
Hey, I won. I won. I'm winning at life, man. Congratulations to me. I'm a little shocked at how many people have liked my tweet this morning about being able to fry an egg over easy the first time ever in my life. I'm kind of
Hey man,
confused.
that's a good accomplishment. I'm very food motivated, so congratulations.
Coming from a guy that smoked out the kitchen a few times, so I'm proud of myself, but I'm not sure that this many people should be proud of me for that kind of
No. I'm always gonna give the thumbs up. I mean, people come into food later in life and just getting out of prepared meals or eating out of all the time. No matter when you come to it, it's a fun experiment. It's a fun life experience.
Like I know I was never able to put the right amount of oil on the pan, just like get eggs to not stick, or if they're swimming in oil, or it's then the freaking spatula skills. We used to have this stupid plastic spatula, but it wasn't even it was like just a stirrer thing. It didn't even have like a proper edge to get that egg flipped over, and I was like, wow, this is
Well, join us for our third hour in the podcast where we're going to go over our favorite recipes. I have a wonderful vegan risotto to share with people. It's a vegan mushroom risotto, and I think people are going to be very impressed by it.
Yeah, lots of braising going on.
for no good reason. I really feel like braising some smartphone news. Jules, we've got to jump right in onto this one because
we've got to raise this conversation. Yeah, definitely. Hashtag PN Weekly on Twitter, YouTube chat, everything that we need to be talking about this right now.
Podcast at Pocketnow.com. We're actually going to be holding off on our mailbag because of this news story which just broke this week.
Yeah, so replacing this whole news or this mailbag thing is the news that apparently, according to congressional aides to both the New York Times and Reuters, the Commerce Department has telegraphed what they want to do with ZTE. Now, you realize that ZTE is under basically an imports ban for 7 years because they violated both the terms of, they violated trade sanctions, first of all, by doing business in Iran and North Korea, but also the settlement that they reached after they worked things out with the Commerce Department the first time around. And so instead of that ban, they're now going to perhaps do a fine, perhaps as large as $1.3 billion. And that's it's not clear whether that's in excess of the $800 billion or if that's being added on, if that is the total amount that they will have to pay for these infractions. And they would also have to install U.S. compliance monitors and execute big shifts in their management. And the announcement has not been made official just yet. We expect the White House to be talking about this perhaps in a Friday night news dump. Who knows? So we'll have to see about it. Obviously, a lot of the privacy, the cybersecurity hawks, very eager to pounce on this, especially with the claims that ZTE, Huawei, a lot of Chinese manufacturers have been stealing intellectual property, as well as coming under the influence of the authoritative Chinese government, and perhaps doing some of their bidding or using some of their data collected from their users at their will. So lots to talk about here, and I guess, well, what do you think about this whole state, the state of things? Because this was kind of imaged in many corners as a trade peg. This was going to be working with a whole bunch of farm subsidies and farm goods orders and whatnot between U.S. and China. And
Right.
otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about this. But like this, we have the layers here, and they're just so confusing.
Oh, there have been a lot of layers on this story. No, this has been a very delicate, a very sensitive and concerning topic to try and discuss, because it lands on so many different aspects of technology and technology politics. Watching people with an insane amount of power over this industry basically playing games with the outcome of how this stuff should be regulated, monitored, and how penalties should be assessed. I thought it was very concerning, watching punitive actions that could have completely decimated a fairly large corporation worldwide. Again, because we've had some pretty positive experiences with some of their individual consumer products. Like there were some good feelers there. It would have been upsetting to see them completely evaporated. Then to see like chest puffery with international diplomacy happening over this, only to then see strategies get walked back. That this is likely getting walked back in favor of U.S. agricultural imports. I don't see where Chinese telecommunications and United States agricultural products are on the same footing in terms of future industry and future jobs discussions and how our economies work. Getting back to this point, I mean, from the personal standpoint, I'm hoping this means that we'll see some cool phones. Like ultimately, I still want to see a cool phone. I want to see an Axon 9. I'm sort of selfish there.
You want to see the freaking concept where they have the exposed glass on the corners.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't want to see glass on the corner.
IF Design Award 2018, bro.
Well, and then also it's like, why make a glass sandwich when we can also make just an all glass phone?
A glass tortellini. No, it's not a tortellini. It's a ravioli.
But I mean, like, getting back to this story again, I mean, there's the tinfoil hat wearing part of this where I'd be concerned about Trump's personal business interests in what's been going on with some of the properties that are his properties that are going to benefit from Chinese investment in infrastructure. And then what's also been hilarious, you actually linked to this in your write-up here. What's also been hilarious is watching some of the backlash happen on things like other politicians. Marco Rubio coming out to talk tough about how, Trump is given this as a favor to the Chinese. I've got his tweet up here as a quote.
Marco Rubio, a Republican senator from Florida, also chair on the Select Committee on Intelligence.
And so his tweet, quote, "Yes, they have a deal in mind. It is a great deal, ... for ZTE in China. China crushes U.S. companies with no mercy, and they use these telecom companies to spy and steal from us. Many hoped this time would be different. Now Congress will need to act." Again, like the saber rattling is kind of intense, and we've been allowing general news, not technology news, but general news to sort of get away with some of these open-ended accusations of things like spying. I know law enforcement, FBI, CIA, NSA had advisories about Huawei and ZTE products saying they could potentially be used to traffic and user data, but I don't know to date that anyone has actually uncovered any specific wrongdoings outside the normal issues that we faced with numerous companies, not handling our data with the sensitivity, the privacy, and the security that it should. So again, like we've sort of allowed general media and politicians to walk away with a part of this conversation that China equals bad in a way which I don't think is really contributing to the overall. Like, it feels like security theater. It doesn't really feel like we're really discussing things that are going to help protect consumers in an ever evolving technology landscape. Instead, we're trying to just equate, oh, it's a Chinese company, it must be evil. And that, again, that us versus them, or that sort of xenophobic approach to diplomacy, I don't feel is going to be a good long-term strategy for our economy.
Well, I mean, they're trying to find a way to undermine, certain aspects of the Chinese government, such as land ownership claims in the South Pacific Ocean, or human rights violations, and it's a multifaceted scheme. The fact of the matter is, in the topic of trade, there's just no getting over that they are the second largest economy in the world, and they're bumping right against us. So there is if they want to play ball, then Trump will play ball. He wanted a trade war. He campaigned on that promise during his presidential run-up, and now he's getting it. And he wants to be able to come out of this with a good face. I mean, that's his style. We've seen it throughout his career. Even though this may or may not end up being a loss in some other categories, such as cybersecurity and whatnot, he is going to count this as carrying out a promise that he made. I mean, he tweeted about it. Therefore, it must be, in order. It must be de facto, not de facto, real.
Well, it's going to be, you're right, in the Trump ledger, that will go down under the column of "I achieved." Yeah. Like, I did the thing what I said. No, you're totally right there, and there's going to be a lot of gamesmanship going on in this as sort of an evolving.
Oh, totally. I should also mention, we had that report back a few months ago about that the nationalization of the 5G network. Some intelligence heads talking about that, and the White House officials had to walk back that report. It didn't sound like that was going to be a Trump thing in and of itself. That was more of a Washington, more of a machine kind of deal that would have had to take place. And all that, again, was to combat against Chinese influence on the grid, even though there is very limited reach in terms of Huawei and ZTE in our grid. I think the numbers are in the single digits, low single digits even. So in terms of the share of equipment that is held. So
I was going to say, wasn't Huawei like under 5% in terms of?
It was like 4, and then maybe ZTE was even like 1%, making it for
I would have been surprised if ZTE was like within the margin of error.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, it doesn't, quantity is not necessarily what they're going after. It may be just data that they can extract from the 96%. I don't know.
Totally. So, well, and because they have that one cell tower in Poughkeepsie, they can hack your mainframes now. This is from Renata Laporte using the PN Weekly hashtag. If the EU or the US had any proof, the smallest hint that Chinese telecom companies were spying on us, they'd burn those companies to the ground. Because then Ericsson, Qualcomm, Nokia, and Siemens wouldn't be facing the, this is his words, not mine, the Oriental giants anymore. This is a very complex set of feels that I have on this story because of some of the positive experiences I've had with the consumer facing section of these brands. And then also my desire for competition. I don't believe we see a healthy consumer market unless there's some play where companies have to face each other, where they actually have to compete for consumer dollars. This is, I think, going to be another one of those where there's a lot caught up in the sort of tribalism, where Chinese industry seems to get a significant bump and boost, maybe an unfair advantage in some markets because of the way the government backs certain corporations. But at the same time, we also want to see products that actually improve upon the condition that we have right now. And I don't believe we get that if we in America have the opposite approach of trying to lock down our development and our infrastructure to only one or two players here. We're artificially creating something that we're accusing the Chinese of doing if we only let Qualcomm do business in the United States.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, they have been found by Chinese courts to have breached some sort of antitrust threshold, and they've been forced to make good with many of the Chinese manufacturers that
Oh,
they've had.
I absolutely agree, because this is also one of those conversations where I feel like government, our current collection of governments and the regulatory bodies within those governments seem ill-equipped to handle a new breed of juggernaut corporation. Of really, like, light touch regulation doesn't really seem to work right now. And I fear, as a capitalist, I fear a significant pendulum swing to try and overcorrect for the situation that we currently see, where it's difficult to rein that in. You talk about a company like Qualcomm, and they're in this conversation for conservative politicians in the United States. They're going to be the golden child to point to. This is the company we need to let do most of our infrastructure for 5G. That's become a whole bunch of talking points and buzz terms that I don't think our politicians know or understand anything about what they're talking about for this collection of technologies. But at the same time, as tech enthusiasts, we can point to Qualcomm and certain types of business tactics that they've employed, which don't necessarily paint them out to be good guys in every single conversation that we have. And we look at other mega corporations like Apple trying to get away from using Qualcomm products too. So this, again, it becomes a very tangled web of different types of conversations and different types of stories to unravel. What is it that we even just hope to achieve? At some point, what is it that we hope? Well, Jules, let me actually just throw this point out to you. For our infrastructure and for our consumer gadget landscape, like, what do we hope that this will look like over the next 5 years? Or
For
what do
an
you hope this
industry,
will look like?
well, for an industry that is kind of ironically reliant on connectivity to be able to grow and prosper, in the case of America, I mean, again, I have to go back to it. It's America first. Republicans have been very keen on keeping Qualcomm in the U.S. They were fighting off any attempts to see Broadcom, Singapore-based Broadcom, have anything to do with Qualcomm at all. So, for the time being, at least in the start of this 5G race, I think we're still in it to win it. But as we go along, we see the other players, Nokia, Ericsson, get into their gear, possibly through Qualcomm's own undoing, be it the forcing of SEP, standard essential patents, or whatnot. Perhaps there will be some leveling of the playing field, just because it has taken on so much of this animosity and so much of a it's part of its own blame. Part of its own structuring of its business that has really not helped them out at all. They're trying to change that, but it's going to take a while. And in the meantime, there's definitely going to be a tidal shift going on here. So definitely something to look out for. I really think that we'll be able to see something over the weekend. So this podcast might be a little bit old by the time you listen to it after the fact, but
I was going to say, and you heard it here first, folks. The Axon 9, the most amazing phone of the year.
Yes, this July, sure. Let's say that, or August or something. I want to go over to Apple v Samsung.
Let's get this out of the way.
I mean, it's almost been 7 years, right? It's 7 years since the start of this, or even like 2010. So 8 years, that is a long. And we've had these series of lawsuits determining what Samsung owed in terms of design patents that were held by Apple and have been infringed upon. And we're talking about these Galaxy S, Galaxy S2, copying the basic design of the iPhone, which is just that home button, that screen, and that bezel that you see right there. There was also the freaking colorful grid of icons for apps and the home screen and whatnot, and one other kind of thing. So and they stuffed in a few,
like the Palm Pilot.
Yeah. Well, it matters who has the patent and
Yeah,
what
it really does.
accepted.
Poor
So,
Palm OS.
oh man. Well, and there were a few utility patents too, like the slide to unlock feature, but those were not the main bits of contention here because these three patents generated approximately $533 million for
Well,
Apple.
and like if we're untangling the whole conversation, this was the lawsuit which originally posted a $1 billion penalty for Samsung, which has been whittled back on appeal after appeal after appeal. And
Yeah.
this last case was trying to determine if even the 533 million was somehow up for grabs.
Well, I mean, so like there, it was whittled down between packaging disputes. So, like, if the packaging
Yeah.
was infringible, also a few patents got thrown out of the case, and it was, so it went down to like 400 million at one point. And through the appeals process, it went up to the Supreme Court, and well, the Supreme Court took a look at it and basically tossed it back to the district court to determine what is the article of manufacture when it comes to these patents. What does it apply to? Does it apply to the parts, or does it apply to the whole of the product? And we'll take this case here from Law 360's Dorothy M. Atkins. One juror told her that they found the facade patent to have applied just to the parts. So the physical appearance of the phone is just the parts of the phone, whereas the grid, the icon, the home screens, that was indicative of the whole phone, and
Yeah.
therefore it should be that's where you see a whole bunch of these variances in terms of which phones were generated the most damages. So if we go to the document over at Foss Patents, thank you to Florian Mueller for publishing this. We see that the top ranking device here is the Galaxy S4G, which raked in 75 million or nearly $76 million just because of that design. Just it had everything to it that basically made it an iPhone in regards to those three patents. So yeah, this is I mean,
Well,
because
no,
if Samsung was able to get their way and say that only the parts apply to all three patents, then
right.
they would have asked for it would only have been $30 million, whereas Apple wanted the full $1 million or full $1 billion, and this house somehow splits it along. And there's some debate as to what software design patents as to applying to software really do, and or really are really
Well, and
representative.
also, I mean, like in how we're trying to protect certain types of intellectual property and what should we be able to protect is another long running question that needs to be untangled by legal experts over successive generations of products. It's just after a point, we all need to like, is this finally done? Is it finally done? Are we done? Can Apple and Samsung finally move on here?
Well,
And
Apple's
I
happy with the payout, and it
yeah,
doesn't sound like Samsung will be mustering up the effort, at least for now, to go through post-trial procedures or file appeal. Yeah.
that's what I'm really worried about. Like, will we see that last Hail Mary appeal from Samsung? Because I also have to wonder that since this has been going on since what, like the Galaxy S3 was launched.
Galaxy S2, Galaxy S
No, but I
is
mean, like the actual lawsuits have been going
oh,
on.
well, the
After.
verdict was in 2012. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay. So
Galaxy
yeah.
S3.
So we're talking 6 years of lawyer fees. I almost have to wonder, like, the legal team at Samsung, how close are they to matching the remainder of the payout they would have had to have paid if they just paid it up front? Like,
Yeah.
is this $500 million worth of lawyer fees for corporate? I just it needs to be done. And I feel like we can kind of move on. Our chat has already run away with HTC U12 conversation, which we'll get to in just a bit, but we're going to cover a few news stories first.
Yeah, indeed. Speaking of HTC, not speaking of HTC, how about we stick with Apple and talk about Bendgate again? Yeah, we're covering all the stories from the past. It makes
All the
this
hits.
this news sound
The
like
hits
it's
just keep
old.
on coming.
It's freaking oldies 98.5 on your dial. Let's talk about this same deal here. We're talking about the same court because Judge Lucy Coe, hello to you again, is apparently on this case, and we're
I
dealing
don't know
with a
how
couple
she
of.
gets these tech lawsuits, because I don't think she's super
She's
well
a
equipped for them.
super expert, I guess. Well, I mean, all judges have to be, well, they have to at least read and get some knowledge seeking on the topics that they cover. I don't know. In
Yeah.
any case, we're talking about this lawsuit that's attempting to gain class action status, and it has failed. Now, this lawsuit would be over both touch disease, which is the great pixelation issue at the top of the display of the iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus, also the reduced touch sensitivity thereof, and also Bendgate, which also applies to the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, where it was just easily bendable as compared to that iPhone 5S. We're hearing from Lucy Coe's opinion here that Apple's internal testing determined that the iPhone 6 was 3.3 times more likely to bend than the iPhone 5S, while the iPhone 6 Plus was 7.2 times more likely to bend. And there was also talk about more epoxy in response. So they were going to apply more underfill to the logic board to prevent anything happening to the connection of the display panel, which in part caused the touch disease to happen. Underfill is used to prevent the manifestation of chip defects induced by bending because it reinforces the connections and prevents them from bending away from the substrate, the plaintiffs explain. Apple had used underfill on the preceding iPhone generation, but did not start using it on the Meson chip, which was the applicable display controller chip on the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus until May 2016, which is 20 months after those devices debuted. And while the actual full testimony, the actual full disclosures of Apple and the plaintiffs are still under seal, I mean, this gives us a good insight into, well, the fact that Apple knew about these issues before they would happen, but or they just they
Well, I
didn't
mean,
act.
if we're talking about class action lawsuit, just the very first quote that we have from the papers that Lucy Coe is referencing: Apple's internal testing determined that the iPhone 6 was 3.3 times more likely to bend. The iPhone 6 Plus was 7.2 times more likely to bend than the iPhone 5S. Having their legal team come out and then make claims that, oh, well, we don't believe that Apple has publicly denied that bending was caused by a fault in its design or materials. Like, well, your own internal testing is showing a trend towards this being an actual manufacturing defect. And that's as rationally, and I'm sure, again, you need lawyers to untangle all of this, and class actions never really appropriately deliver the justice that they should. We're gonna have to go through rounds and probably multiple appeals, and then everyone who owned an iPhone 6, who still has their receipt, their original box, and like all of the papers that came in the box.
And all the consumer protection laws are state-based, which makes the whole model
Yeah.
confusing to
So
whoever is being joined.
this all is finally determined, like, if you have everything that you can show to prove that you had an iPhone 6, then you'll get, $17 from this class action lawsuit. And well, boy, we showed Apple on that one. This to me looks pretty damning. And again, I want to give that shout out to a dude like Luis Rossmann, who's been very aggro about his conversation about Apple build quality. He's really made me rethink things like the MacBook, whether or not I'm recommending the MacBook to certain family members. And he was years ahead of that discussion. And now we're also seeing class action lawsuits about MacBook keyboard defects. So again, we're going through this process again for a manufacturer that prides themselves on just working and making premium products and being sort of a gold standard for a consumer experience. I think that they have more to live up to than they currently are for satisfying the consumer experience.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I have nothing more to say to that.
Nah, let's move on to the next topic. Again, I
Yeah.
like folks are actually lit up and want to talk about the HTC. So let's see if we can hit the rest of this news.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, bezel-less phone, Vivo Apex. It was a phone that we saw during MWC, or at least Vivo showed it to some people during private briefings and made it public thereafter. And now they're going all public saying that it's going to be debuting June 12th. It's the bezel-less full, almost full facade display. And therefore, it would have a pop-up selfie camera coming out of the top. And yeah, I mean, it looks cool. All the specs you need, Snapdragon 845 and whatnot. So yeah,
Cool.
good. Thank you. Thank you, Vivo, for this. Hopefully you'll release it in the
No, not
United States.
thumbs up.
Yes. Let's talk about bad things. I'm not sure if I think you've owned a Martian, or at least used a Martian smartwatch, haven't you?
Yeah, Martian was actually one of the first watches that I reviewed on my own personal channel.
Yeah.
Way back in the day. It was a Martian, then I think I got my hands on a Qualcomm Talk and then a Pebble. I had a lot of really fond memories of using that Martian, and I was very upset to hear that they're killing this. Well, I was pissed that they were doing a Kickstarter. It's kind of like the big sin of Pebble. You know, like you're an established brand, you're an established company. Don't use Kickstarter as a pre-order system. Make your
No.
own pre-order system. Just be a grown-up. And when I saw Martian was doing a Kickstarter, it made me a lot less interested in what they were trying to do. And now I'm not terribly surprised that they're basically killing it and walking away.
Yeah, I mean, they've had 11 years to do what they wanted to do,
Right? I mean,
and
they've had time to figure this out.
yeah. So the M Voice G2, which was backed on, or well, backed on Kickstarter for all intents and purposes, is canceled, and
It's
yeah,
gone.
it's gone.
I
Only
mean,
480 units were shipped.
because the other big one in that same vein, I'm not. It's Android Wear. I mean, excuse me, Wear OS. I still want to see some positive action there, and I think Google needs to rejoin this conversation with a Pixel watch so that they can at least have all their branding under the same umbrella.
Yeah.
But in killing this goes right along with the news this morning that a lot of us were picking up on and reading through of Andy Rubin uh, pulling the plug on an essential phone too.
Yeah, I
And
think I skipped that one. I apologize.
Oh no worries, because that actually lines up perfect with Martian. You know, again, it's a brand kind of pulling the plug on a product. This one's going to be even higher profile, and I had a lengthy Twitter rant about it. If you want to check that out at some gadget guy on Twitter, just this notion of like taking your ball and going home. You know, Andy Rubin spent so much time and energy at the beginning of the Essential launch talking about how he intended for this to be a niche product. It wasn't going to be about trying to blow down, sales goals or, start cracking into the overall smartphone market. It was about being disruptive and building up a fan base and a community and doing it organically. And then everything that the company did reeked of the same mistakes that every single tech brand has made in trying to launch a new product, of assuming that they were going to have a hit on their hands in the very first generation and not preparing for multiple years of struggle in the marketplace. I have said this for years now, that it takes about 3 generations of a product, of consistent updates, of improvements, of launching new hardware, and of having savvy advertising before consumers will take you seriously. Andy Rubin pulling Essential out of the race after the first generation of a product is only going to reinforce in tech reviewers, tech enthusiasts, and consumers' minds that you should never take a risk on a new company. You should only ever buy products that are already popular. So this is another one, like, I'm pissed. I'm mad. Essential had so many things that they made so many missteps in launching their first phone, but it was such a compelling device for a first offering. And they completely missed the conversation about it being a luxury premium gadget. They spent way too much time trying to court tech enthusiasts, who tech enthusiasts are going to be your worst critics. Don't go after the tech enthusiasts. Go after lifestyle people that wear fancy watches with a phone that's made out of titanium and ceramic. And then getting to the end of this to then go, oh, well, we didn't really mean it. we kind of lied about all this organic community building and being in the market and being a niche player and trying to appeal to a different kind of sensibility. That was all a lie. So instead, you should only buy an iPhone or a Galaxy because those are the only products that you know are gonna last. So peace out. Is so upsetting, is so frustrating. And again, it makes me just it makes me want to take my ball and go home. I guess it's predestined that we're always going to have just a Samsung Apple dichotomy.
Well, it's definitely a shame, though, especially with the software update schedule that they have been on. I mean, if there was any saving star for them, that was it. That was they were doing month by month and adding new features all along and being really responsive. And let's be clear here, even though Andy Rubin, he doesn't deny or confirm much of anything from the Bloomberg reporting that he may be selling the company. I mean, they hired a bank to help them find a suitor, so that's I think that's a pretty good assumption right there. And then later on, in like he freaking sent a memo to the employees and talking about how the Bloomberg piece said would not position the company well for optimizing fundraising, because the option is that he could go just raise money for the company to at least continue on. So
but no, it's I mean, you might be able to have some of those internal conversations, but it's this like the public tweet of we're putting all of our efforts towards our future game-changing products. Well, the name is tarnished. I don't have any faith that you're going to stay in the market if you do have something cool.
We always have multiple products in development at the same time, and we embrace canceling some in favor of the ones we think will be bigger hits. Implicitly, I guess, confirming that the Essential Phone 2 was canceled. We are putting all of our efforts towards our future game-changing products, which include mobile and home products.
But then to wrap this all up with his last pithy little quote, I'm going to focus on winning and not whining. I mean, like, grow up. Like, seriously. Either join this conversation in earnest and know what the reality of trying to make these kinds of products looks like, or just stay out of it and just rest on your laurels of being the dude what made parts of Android before Android was super popular. So great.
And I guess that's that for the moment. In the meantime, moving on to some of the impacts from the Sprint T-Mobile merger. We talked about this last week, and we're going to talk about it again this week, just because there have been a couple of big kind of jockeying moves going on. So with the Sprint T-Mobile merger, prepaid market in the U.S., the prepaid cellular market in the U.S. would be controlled mostly by this new T-Mobile. They would have 54% between Boost Mobile, Virgin Mobile, and Metro PCS. And what some people are doing right now, or at least Freedom Pop is doing, is launching Unreal Mobile, which is a new mobile MVNO operation that it would start at $15 per month for unlimited data, unlimited texts and talks, and also some more advanced features from the big carriers like VPN or a single number for multiple devices and such. And this is because they say that Sprint and T-Mobile are playing nice and making sure that they are able to offer the concessions that they need to offer in order for this merger to pass regulatory muster. So for them, for Freedom Pop, I guess, this is going to be early summer start officially. This is just going to be a beta trial for now, but $15 per month, trying to exploit some of the business deals going on around them.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, but I think that's kind of interesting though, is seeing like the VPN becoming a bigger selling point for tech companies right now. I saw a press release in my email this morning that
for VPN Hub.
Yeah, that even Pornhub, the backers behind Pornhub are looking at creating their own VPN service too. So take that, UK. But yeah, again, positive moves there, but this tying right into that notion of Boost Mobile, the founder of Boost Mobile wanting to take it back from Sprint and T-Mobile. Competition in this space should be a bit more worrying to regulators than I think it has been. I think they look at the main uh, contract style market, and where T-Mobile and Sprint would make, sort of what, like if you combined all their subscribers, they'd still be third place,
Yeah,
right? They'd still
they'd be
be
around
behind.
130-ish.
So they look at that and they say, "Oh, well, that's not scary." But then looking at 54% of the prepaid market is kind of scary. So I'll be curious to see if, who is it? Pete Adderton, the gentleman who started Boost Mobile in Australia in the year 2000, is waging a
Y2K?
campaign to get it back. Right? Is going to become a Conan O'Brien sketch here. But yeah, so I'll be curious to see if that kind of conversation has any legs, because I think people are underestimating the economic force of that much weight in the prepaid market.
Yeah, especially the dependency on that kind of thing when you're making less than $40,000 a year and you're relying on those services. So definitely lots to talk about there, and also lots to talk about Apple. Again, we're going back to that topic, but to the App Store and these independent developers that aren't big enough to do subscription-based subscriptions on their apps, but they're asking for free trials just as much as the free trial exists for those subscription based apps. And they're saying this because they just want to be able to push past the freemium model where a crippled app on display on demo for many people is just not good enough, and perhaps just a free trial of the full experience, this helps them establish value with the user. So this is not the only effort they're going in on. I have not checked since the last time I visited their website, but it looks like they're closing in on 600 apps and nearly 550 developers behind this cause. Yeah, they're also working for increased commissions. So 15%, which is the amount that Apple takes on a subscription per year after the year mark. So they just want to extend that 15% rate to everyone. Yeah.
Yes, true.
Yeah.
No,
No,
I'm actually just kind of surprised that I mean, no, it makes sense. Apple can do whatever they want on their platform. It's their app store, and if they want to position their own services where you can use them for free and entice the consumer into using that, then again, why should Apple have to give the same benefits to other developers, right? It's all about having a free market. Can't tell Apple what to do. Can't make them be fair to everybody. It's their platform.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, their platform, their apps, or well, not their apps, the publisher's apps, and I mean, maybe not develop iOS apps again and just leave it to the big people, the CBS and ABC, or like freaking, I don't even know the big
Yeah,
app.
I mean, I'm absolutely being facetious there. It's one of those things where we're going to run into the power of the corporation and how much influence it has over other people's abilities to create new products and services. So that's a sticky conversation at the ISP level, where a Comcast is going to make an argument that they should be able to throttle or prevent you from looking up content or charge you more for certain services. It's going to extend into information services, where Apple, the App Store, is an information service, not a telecommunication service. So, what control should Apple be able to exert? What leverage should they be able to exert over the market as a whole, especially as they have a monopoly, technically, on iOS? It's not like there's any other competition for iOS for apps and services and stuff like that. And this is also where I really hope that web developers get savvier with things like progressive web apps, that maybe we can take some of the power out of these mobile platforms democratically by just going back to a web browser. Like, instead of having all of these tiny little boxes that we install, all these tiny little squares that we install in our phones, maybe there is a solution where we can circumvent app stores entirely. And I would absolutely love to see a near future where that happens.
Yeah, yeah, and Could be the blockchain, could be HTC doing it. Hey ho. Let's quickly wrap up with this story about the Gear S4, or perhaps it's the Galaxy Watch. It could be the first Android Wear watch that Samsung has produced since 2014. That Samsung Gear Live, remember that one? Well, I mean, this I mean, it's only been whispers, but we've been hearing about people walking around Samsung campuses wearing this watch. So yeah, E for
Yeah,
2018.
I'd be very surprised if there weren't if there hadn't been Samsung Android Wear powered Samsung wearables out in the testing ecosystem. Samsung started with Android Wear as a watch OS, and then moved over. Well, no, they started with their own Gear OS and then moved over to Tizen. Didn't they have one variant though that was Android Wear powered? I want to say there was a Samsung Android Wear powered watch.
The Gear Live from 2014.
Yes, thank you. Oh, there it is, right at the top of the article. I was trying to use my brain, and we all know how well that goes. So, I wouldn't be surprised if there hadn't been other Samsung prototypes floating around being utilized just to see what the lay of the land was. I think this definitely speaks to the issues Google has been having in keeping Wear updated and keeping the software relevant, making new features, keeping manufacturers excited and informed as to what's going on. At the same time, if you want I can wear a phone on my wrist experience, I actually do think Tizen is probably the best option for that. So I'll be curious to see what this means. I think a lot of people would agree that Samsung is probably making the best smartwatch hardware right now. And then you just have your own personal preference as to what metaphor of watch usage you enjoy. I seem to be on the losing side of this argument, where I'd love to get back to the Pebble, like an utter clean simplicity of user experience, and not trying to add tons of more features. I want a companion to my phone, not a separate phone-like device that I have to manage. So I don't know what Samsung stands to gain from this. I think they're probably one of the more successful non-Apple devices, and I think they probably make one of the best non-Apple arguments for being in the Galaxy ecosystem. So if they can bring some of that magic to Wear OS, I think that would be great for Google, but I think it would dilute what makes a Wear watch special.
Yeah, I mean, the rotating bezel, I feel like, is the main characteristic of any Gear watch at this point.
I want that real bad for Android Wear. I want that real bad for Wear OS.
Android Wear has or Wear OS has sort of implemented it with that, button crown thing. But it's just, I feel like just that being the ease of use for that, and, being a watch that's worn on your wrist and you have to actually fuss around with it. Like, the manual UI is kind of very important to whether or not the whole experience is pleasurable or not. So I feel like, you get them in on the ground floor of that, and you'll be fine with software, as long as it doesn't crash and slow down inexplicably like Android Wear 2.0. But I mean,
man, Wear OS has been nothing but issues lately.
Really?
Like these most recent updates on my Watch 2, not been good, man. I'm getting notifications crazy late. I'm getting duplicate notifications. That it gets really funky when you switch back and forth between being directly connected to the phone and trying to update over Wi-Fi. I've not been impressed. I am having a progressively less good time on the Wear OS platform as it evolves, and I just don't have anything that really fits that hole right now. I want good notifications, interactive notifications, things I can actually reply to. I want good voice actions, so I can do speech to text to reply to a text message if I'm using it out and about. I need notifications off my phone. I do not like checking my phone to see what a notification is. I just don't like. I absolutely hate the experience of looking at my phone for notifications. So all of this leaves me kind of, without a country I'm not going to go to Apple Watch, even though it's probably the best overall platform right now. I'm not currently using a Samsung, so moving over to a Gear really isn't a compelling option either. Pebble's dead. Fitbit isn't very compelling for all of the smartwatch features, and that still leaves me with Wear OS being my default. Like I'm on it by default, which is the worst place to be if you actually care about this kind of accessory technology.
And I don't even read the notifications that I freaking wear on my watch. So it's like, what's the point? It goes into ellipsis, and I have to actually tap into it to read more. Well, great. Yeah, so much for glanceability. But
well, and from like the Huawei, I have the Huawei fitness tracker, and it's like
the Watchway.
I get 4 words, and then it cuts off the notification, and it's not Android Wear, or it's not Wear OS. I keep saying Android Wear. It's not Wear OS, so I can't like touch it and then get more information. It's just that was the notification. You can't do anything with it. And you're like, this would be so much. It was so close to a Pebble. It was so close, an e-paper digital ink style display, awesome battery life, always on heart rate monitoring. It was so close, but then it had 0 features for the smartwatch side of the occasion of the situation, and I was just so disappointed.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to wait and see if all of this actually stirs up and becomes a real thing. I mean, it's a year on, they'll probably have something there. It's just what's it running. So at this point, we're still in the guessing stages. And in the meantime, we have something new. We have something bright and fresh, but also pretty much the same thing as last year. I mean, I don't know.
I mean,
we'll give it a little credit here. I mean, it does have one more. No, it does have 2 more cameras, because the U11 had 1 camera last year, right?
If you couldn't glean from Jules's very wishy-washy introduction to this here, as we're talking about the HTC U12 Plus, bringing back Boomsound speakers, EdgeSense.
There are a lot of upset people in the comments.
There has been quite a bit of debate going back and forth between individual features and what manufacturers are carrying them out better going on in our live chat right now, which is much longer conversation than I can really owe to the rest of our podcast here. But
well, let's start with Goran Petrovic here. Hi guys, I am sad. HTC revealed everything I feared they will. Of course, you have been paying attention to the leaks, so good for you for doing that. 4 cameras and tons of gimmicks, and on top of it all, they've heard Apple won't include the 3.5 millimeter adapter soon, so they did the same. 4.0 quick charger not included too. Instead, they support 4.0, but it's going to be, or it's 4 plus, which Qualcomm, you need to get that sorted out, because this whole thing about standards and branding and whatnot is stupid. And also the adapter issue. It's a quick charge 3.0. Again, Qualcomm, sort this out. But also, I'll give HTC credit, because they do offer a freaking set of earbuds, USB-C earbuds in the freaking thing. It's active noise canceling, and even though it's a form of lock-in, it's a decently priced form of lock-in.
Well, that's exactly why I don't want to give them too much credit, though, because the earbuds that have been coming with HTC phones are not USB-C audio devices. They are proprietary headphones that work on HTC phones. So this is also one of the big fails. Is I'm on an LG G7, which has objectively the absolute best headphone experience available to any smartphone manufacturer today. I did personally produce an LG G7 audio review, which you guys can check out if you guys want. It's my own personal little side revival of talking about smartphone audio. Yeah, so that is an amazing experience, that I unplug one cable from the phone and I plug it into my laptop, or I plug it into my desktop, and I don't have to worry about adapters or fiddling with different USB audio devices or proprietary connections. That's amazing. It works exactly like a standard should. If I had at least a USB-C audio device, a true USB-C audio device like you get with the Huawei headphones are USB-C audio, and then the adapter for the Pixel is a true USB audio device, then at least I could unplug my headphones from my phone and plug them into the USB-C port on my laptop and not have to worry about compatibility. HTC's solution, unfortunately, is locked to the phone. So let's say you're walking around with a phone, you've got your really great HTC earbuds. They are great earbuds, but if you want to use them with anything else, you can't. You're stuck. It's that to me is the absolute worst possible solution for moving us away from the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. I am very, very not impressed with them not including an adapter. And also, if this is true that the fastest quick charging solution is not going to be included in the box, then that to me is consumer gouging. That to me is a very disappointing trend, where our phones used to come with a whole bunch of accessories. You open a Huawei and it comes with not the best, but it comes with a case and an adapter and earbuds and the supercharger and a cable that you're ready to use that phone out of the box. Right now, glass on glass with no accessories, it makes you feel like your $700 to $800 purchase is completely incomplete, and that you're going to have to spend at least another $50 or $100 if you don't already have solutions for those missing items in the smartphone purchase.
I don't feel like I can agree with most of those opinions. First of all, because, well, let's hold off on the USB-C adapter thing, because we haven't had enough hands-on time as of right now to determine if that's the case. If the
Well, that's why I said if it's true that the adapter and the quick charger aren't in the box, then that to me would be that's almost now a deal breaker for a premium phone now.
I mean, if the even if the Usonic buds are still a locked in device, so we'll have to really dive into that. And in the meantime, they're also struggling to again go with carriers on this, because again, it's going to be unlocked. It's going to be at $799 or $849 depending on what you get, and they're dealing with a Galaxy S9 Plus in that territory right there, which is already hard enough. I mean, in terms of like the sales split, it's like a 60-40 or something like that between like a regular and a plus size model. So they're really
a lot of this really does look like it is trying to go up against the larger versions of these phones. I don't think HTC has much design on trying to hit the smaller phones. The battery size on the U12 Plus, the screen size, it looks like they have the Galaxy S9 Plus in their sights, which means pricing is going to start somewhere closer to that territory.
Yeah. So definitely a lot of stuff going on. Let's talk about Boomsound for a quick second. I mean, it's back in the form that it has been since with the HTC 10. You got the woofer down south and the tweeter up north on the earpiece. So, and apparently that's going to be louder than before. They always claim this sort of thing. So again, something to see. Hi-Fi.
I'm happy to see that return. I mean, that was something that the HTC 10 did really well. There were going to be your personal preferences as to whether or not you liked the true stereo speakers from the HTC One, M7, M8, M9, or if you liked the split high frequency, low frequency from the HTC 10. But having two speakers in that place, unless you do something fundamentally different to a mono speaker like what LG did for the boombox feature on the G7, unless you really redesign a part of the phone to enhance a chamber of audio like what they did, then the split speaker solution, I think, was probably one of the best compromises a manufacturer has ever made. It divides up different frequency responsibilities and helps fill out the sound. That they got rid of it for a generation was a bad move, so I'm really happy to see that back.
Yeah, that's back from the HTC 10. Although, I mean, I have the Moto G6 right here, and it's got Dolby enhanced front-facing speakers, and I'm loving it. So, yeah,
right. I mean, like again, like in this conversation about us having impossibly small bezels on devices, that means we do sacrifice certain types of complementary design. You know, like Alcatel front-firing speakers sound really good on $200 to $300 phones. Like they sound really good. And it's because not necessarily because they have the best possible speakers in there, but because they have two speakers on the phone and they're both pointing at your face, which is the right place to point a speaker.
I mean, you're not supposed to point it at your nose, but I mean, the nose is pretty
Oh,
close
the
to the
nose
ear.
knows. The nose knows
Yeah.
what's up.
You don't
This
have to do
nose
it. You don't have
knows.
to like pull like a sideways ear bending kind of pose with the arms and
Right.
whatnot. So
No,
I mean, that's
it's
all
only
good.
been till the G7 that I feel like a phone has actually is actually powerful enough for me to not just shrug at a mono bottom firing speaker. Like, okay, we finally have something that I think is worthy of
17
joining the group.
times resonance chamber,
It gets
whatever. Yeah.
uncomfortably loud when you hold it up. I mean, it's pretty shocking. And then it sounds even better when you put it on a table. And then it sounds even better when you put it on a big hollow box. And it feels like something that HTC would have done back in the day.
It sounds pretty woody. Yeah, I don't know.
Heyo. Well,
Mm.
mine,
Well,
my, unfortunately for my test when I did test the G7 is like it sounds kind of cardboardy. It's like I didn't have any really good I didn't have a good speaker cab I could put it on. I didn't have like a keepsake box or a guitar. I play the bass guitar. I don't have an acoustic bass guitar. So instead I just put it on an old UPS box. So it looks super janky, but like as soon as you put it on there, like, oh my God, that's ridiculous. I want to be excited about HTC audio like that again, but this feels like, okay, we're just returning to a sensible HTC. Like HTC shouldn't have gotten rid of this feature. So really, I'm just relieved that it's back on one of their phones again.
so one step forward after so many steps back, I guess.
No, I mean, we should praise that. I mean, that is a smart recovery. I am happy to see that. It's just knowing how LG has sort of taken up the mantle of high quality audio, and Boomsound branding used to be the gold standard for smartphone audio. It's just something that I feel it's that differentiator that I feel HTC has lost that used to set them apart. And now, it puts them right back in there with like a Mate 10 Pro. That's essentially what we're looking at now. The HTC U12 Plus, what really makes it a different or compelling option from a phone that was out at the end of last year?
And it's something that can keep your ear canals happy. And I realize that. But what about the front? And we're not talking about the nose, but the eyes this time, and what it can capture with its eyes. Let's talk about the camera here.
Having dual cameras on the front. Yeah, let's jump in.
Well, dual cameras on the front, dual cameras on the back. The dual cameras on the selfie side apparently help with Face ID and depth perception for that bokeh feature. There was also a wide angle wide angle camera on the front. So I don't know how, if I were to approximate 84 degrees as a angle, as a field of view, I mean, that's okay, that's decent, but you'd have to, if you were to go for like a group selfie, then you would have to push some people way back, and I don't know. But it's a good step. And then there's the front too, or the rear. Yeah, the rear. And we're talking about what's the combination here? 12 and 16, and the 16 megapixel sensor has optical zoom of 1.85 to 2 times. I'm guessing part of that's got to do with focusing. Perhaps they have an actual focus motor in there, which would be interesting to see. Although it's at an f2.6 aperture, kind of shifty at that point, even though they're proclaiming big pixel sizes on the sensor.
Yeah,
So
I would be concerned about that. I would be very surprised if the zoom sensor on the U12 functions any differently than Samsung or Apple. That once you get into indoor and lower light conditions, that it's just pulling from the main sensor anyway.
Well, I bet you would be surprised then that the freaking U12 Plus has received a DxO Mark Mobile score of 103, officially beating the Huawei P20, but not the P20 Pro, which stands at 109. So
I'm not terribly surprised by the overall camera score. I mean, since the HTC 10, they've been making good cameras. Anyone who's been deriding HTC cameras, I would be very worried that they just don't know how cameras work. Like they've been fine cameras. They just haven't been like, groundbreaking. They always just seem to rise to the trend and to the performance expected of a flagship of that year. But they've always been, especially getting out of the 1M9. The 1M9 was a terrible experience. But getting back into the HTC 10 and moving forward, they've been perfectly competitive and high quality performers. So I'm not surprised to see them beating out the smaller P20 here now that they're finally getting on to this multiple image sensor system, and their processing is likely influenced by some of the recent software changes that Google has been making too. I would imagine that some of that conversation from previous Pixel manufacturing has likely rubbed off on HTC proper. Not just the engineers who left HTC to go to Google, just, that back and forth. This was a phone that was likely in development a year and a half ago. So I would imagine that they've learned a few things from helping make Pixel phones. That to me makes perfect sense. But it's also, the zoom sensor is my least favorite way to do a dual camera phone. So,
well, I mean, that's what I'm going to with the whole DxO Mark thing, because they do prioritize that zoom factor. Even if a phone has a wide angle sensor, they're still going to proclaim, hey, zoom is going to be an important factor in our testing here. We're talking about 54 millimeter equivalents here on that zoom. And it does produce more detailed photos at a 2x crop, or something like that, as compared to an iPhone 10 or a Pixel 2. We do sacrifice that brightness that we've been talking about, but also there's just a little bit more of that sharpness enhancement, so it's trying to extrapolate details that might be a little bit
I'm looking at their samples, and I actually trust that DxO is internally consistent. It's that I think, trying to sum up the overall camera experience, it takes me 20 minutes to talk about a smartphone camera, just a camera. My last G7 audio review was a 19-minute video. I mean, it's tough to get into the depth of this stuff and properly explain the experience and not just have it be 30 seconds as a part of an overall phone review, So the same thing has to hold true for DxO. You can't sum up the camera with one score. You actually do need to go to their review and look at some of their pros and cons. But when I look at, like, they compare the HTC U12 Plus to the Google Pixel 2 in a 2x zoom crop, and there's a lot of extra sharpening going on the U12 to try and pull out that detail, especially compared to the iPhone X, which also has a zoom sensor on there. I compare some of their results to some of the experiences I've had on, say, like the LG V30 with the glass lens element, and I kind of feel like you're not that much better going with the zoom sensor. It is better, but only if you're doing like a 100% crop pixel peep of that detail. I don't think it's so much better that we need to have a whole second sensor on the phone just to get us a little bit closer to our subject from far away. Because once you fully zoom in, the quality on these shots goes to garbage anyway.
Yeah, I mean, they point that out in terms of artifacting and whatnot, but those are just minor circumstances that we can forgive. Autofocus seems to be one of the big selling points for HTC's cameras this year, and apparently it lives up to it with short delays of their autofocusing system, which is comprised of both this dual pixel or phase detect autofocus, and the laser sensing system. Yeah, that's apparently been very well for them. It's been very, very fast and accurate.
Excellent.
As well. So, I mean, yeah, you get what you give, I guess. But yeah, all this is happening. A quick take on the slow motion. They're only still at 240 FPS. You think it's a big loss that they're not in the 960 game?
Or I think we'd just like to see them step up to what is it? OnePlus is at 480.
480, yeah.
Their slow mo is. This is another bummer that I've had with some of these smaller players like LG too. They might focus on a handful of features and do them really well, but then they'll let some of their fun features just sort of wither. And this is one of those things. It's I don't believe that slow motion video is something that people are really motivated to make a purchasing decision off of, but it's nice when you have it and it's fun to play with. And then when you don't get that, or you don't get a serious improvement to it, that's one of those things that just sort of sticks out as a little bit of a letdown. Like, oh, bummer. I really wish this had like that crazy burst mode from a Sony phone, or 480 frame per second burst, like from a Samsung or from OnePlus. Not having it just feels like, oh, I'm not getting everything. I want to get everything. So I guess I don't know that it should be heavily weighted in an overall review, though. I mean, even for when I'm trying to capture photos and videos of my daughter, I'm almost never thinking, oh, this crazy Tasmanian devil toddler, I should try and get her in slow motion. No, I'm really just trying to struggle to keep up to capture the highest quality images in 4K video that I can to really preserve memories. I'm never thinking, oh, this would be really cool if I could get her shenanigans and then do like a slow-mo speed ramp or something like that.
I don't know. I mean, some parents might think so. It's kind of,
yeah. Like, when you look at that, are you thinking like, hey, I really want slowed down 720p footage of my kid playing at the park? Or do I want like really high quality, crispy, juicy, vibrant images or photos or stills that I can share with the grandparents and have them go and look and see and show that off? I think
well, you kind of have have a mix, do both, and it's like kind of cool like that, because just differ things up. I don't know.
I think occasionally it is, but I think the core, I think it's correct to focus on the core photo and video experience and not to get overly hung up about some of the fun features. It's just those fun features make you feel like you're missing out on stuff when you don't have them. So that's also why I think like, the DxO Mark score, again, even for not having a crazy awesome slow motion feature, I think their scoring is internally consistent. I think they've been covering these gadgets consistently. And I think the overall score there, that's emblematic of what the HTC camera, that's how it should be ranked. But you would want to go through and pick out, maybe you value certain types of video performance better. Maybe you value certain types of photo performance better. And that's where you get into trouble if you only look at DxO's top score.
Yeah, the JCB Mark score is coming out soon, right?
And the what scores?
The JCB Mark.
I mean, we'll see, man. I unfortunately, I've been trying to wrap up the G7 camera review, and the last week we've been having the worst May gray and June gloom in Southern California. So I haven't gotten any daylight shots since I took it down to San Diego. So I'm waiting to get my last couple really good daylight samples, and then I'll be able to talk G7, and then I'm going to be moving on to the OnePlus 6.
Just head out to Barstow and freaking get all the sun you want.
I might have to, because again, I don't need much. I just need a handful of my consistent test setups to get those last couple review points done. And it's just bugging the crap out of me that it's like the lighting is way off from how I normally produce my camera reviews. But if HTC wants to join that conversation, I would be happy to take the U12 Plus out for a spin. But the next phone up on my list is going to be the OnePlus 6.
Yeah. James W in the YouTube chat quickly saying, I do trust HTC's camera. The U11 was the top camera before the Pixel 2 and the iPhone 8. I
haven't had any complaints. And again, like, I think they've been consistently solid performers since the HTC 10. Whether or not they have the bells and whistles that really light you up, that really appeal to you, I can definitely understand that subjective argument. But the core push shutter button, get photo, get video performance has been top tier. Like, they've been no complaints, solid premium flagship grade experiences for the last several years.
Well, we had our meat and potatoes, but as we move away from the camera towards the fun features that we've talked about, they're building on this fun feature, or maybe it's fun, maybe it's not, but EdSense 2. With the squeeze mechanic for the doing not only triggering apps just with a squeeze or like a certain level of squeeze, you can squeeze and activate a macro, like a tap on the screen of a certain app, so that you can have easy access to whatever function is right there. So, and they've expanded that, so now it's you can do a double squeeze or a double tap or something like that, and you also have detection of when the hand is there, so that it just stays in portrait mode, even though you're kind of lying down reading something, and still have it on auto rotate, which is all right. That's fine. You'll have more of that screen to look at. 2x1 display. The first mainstream HTC device. Even we're not talking about the U11 Plus, which didn't make it to North America. It's the first one here, so I guess that's that for us. Side bezels look pretty thin. I'll say that. Top and bottom bezels.
I just kind of want to ask, like, your experiences, because I've gone out of my way to disable, like, on the Pixel, on Samsung devices, on the G7. I disable any kind of hardware that only points me to an assistant or to, smart features like that. Like, if it can't be remapped like it used to be on Galaxy Active phones, then it's a button that's completely useless to me. You've been rocking a Pixel. Do you squeeze your phone to do stuff ever?
Hey, what's Juan talking about?
I'm not sure.
Hey-o. But no, seriously, I mean, like, is that something that you use over the voice action? If you have to talk to your phone anyway,
no, I literally did. I did that, and like I've been doing that every so often, just because I can't be arsed to go in and say, "Hey Google," or like go to the freaking text field and like that. I pull it out, and it's just boom, and I ask my question. So,
but that's kind of what I'm talking about, though. Is, again, is this really worth building in dedicated hardware to support an interaction which already has a meaningful, organic, interactive quality to it through a hot word?
I can't be arsed to say the hot word. Like that's part of it. Like, it's like, hey Google, oh, you can't, you can't recognize that, but you recognize when I say hot pizza, and suddenly you're like, oh, let's talk about hot pizza. Fine, great. That's great. So I don't bother with the hot word and just rely on something more reliable, like my hands.
Okay.
Yeah, no, seriously.
I mean, I think a part of this is also I had to give up on squeezy features because it would trigger whenever I put my phone in its car cradle.
Really? Yeah,
so I mean, it would trigger, and then it would just stay off because it's being constantly squeezed the entire time. But if I'm driving, I'm not going to push a button. I'm not going to squeeze the phone. I'm going to use my voice, which
that's true. That makes sense when you're driving. But I mean, I'm walking around and going through transit, and you're like just running and holding 15 things at once sometimes.
Well, and that's another thing too, is like I've started relying on headphones more. Like I'll long press on a headphone button to get to basic call features or to basic voice actions that way. So again,
oh my God, are we talking about like city phones and country phones where like
we totally are? No, like this is city mouse and country mouse, but it's also like I've been really working to minimize how many times I need to pick up and handle the phone to get things done that I can do without breaking my focus on some other aspect of the world around me, in front of me. And if I'm walking around, and I'm usually wearing a pair of headphones if I'm walking around, and the basic stuff can be covered by long pressing on a headset button or some type of voice interaction that way, and I don't even have to pull my phone out of my pocket, then that's something that's been appealing to me more too. So again, I guess that is, again, it's more of a subjective experience, but I'm really curious. What does squeezing a phone bring as a gesture or an interaction that we need that kind of hardware increasing the price of the phone to cover stuff which already has another solution?
I don't know. I mean, between like going through the headset just to deal with playback controls, I don't happen to have a assistant button on this thing because it's this is not it, but somewhere in this room is the Bluetooth headset that I use to go outside. But yeah, it's like it doesn't have an assistant button, and it's just like it's a cheap little thing that I got because I lost my other pair of headphones in while I was traveling. And even then it was like tiny little thing. It was a little nub, or like it was something that was like, you have to do hand acrobatics just to get at and press it in a certain way so that it actuates. So it's like, well, Yeah, okay, fine then. I'll do something that has more surface area, that has more, of a less of a, margin of error to
So
trigger,
wait,
and it's
on
like,
the
yeah,
earbuds that you're currently using. Sorry, rest of the audience. Jules and I are just going to run a little headset tech support here right now.
yeah, yeah, totally.
Mr. Wong, if you could, just describe to me what headset you're using. No,
It's an over the ear thing. It's over
I'd
the ear
always
thing.
assumed that as long as you had some kind of like phone answering button that you just could long press and that would activate the assistant.
No, it's not. It doesn't have an embedded mic, but even then, it's kind of.
Oh, okay.
This one
That
doesn't have an embedded mic, but even with my job, I never really actually. Well, first of all, I don't really get calls, and most of them are spam. So it's
well, no,
kind of like
but I
that
mean not
hasn't
for
been habituated for me.
not for answering calls. What I mean is even when I want to do something tactile to activate voice assistant, I still don't want to get my phone out of my pocket. I just push the button and then the Google Assistant activates.
Well,
So again,
again,
like I'm not going to squeeze my phone when I'm walking around because I usually have headphones on.
yeah, but totally. And you've been habituated to do that because it's kind of like the controls that you go to more often than I do. And whereas I'm kind of like, well, I don't even take calls, and I just end up like holding the phone out anyways, like a stupid person with the Bluetooth headphone, like, and like the phone out. And like, but it's like, I don't,
Jules, I
it's
really
not.
feel we've untangled something. I feel like we could make your life easier, man. I think
But
you're,
it's like I have to actually search for it sometimes. Like
but you
it's
don't because it's right there.
well, so yeah, like it's like, which but am I turning the headset off? Like,
You
so
just
like
slide
that's,
down and you hold the button. I mean, like,
well,
it's
for your
there.
particular one,
I'm
but
not looking, and it's right
again,
there. And I just found it again.
again, why would but I just don't see it like that though. I don't. It's not. It's not an assistant
and
button.
and
It's a
especially
but.
for when I'm walking around, like I don't want to be handling my phone anymore because they're also flipping fragile now.
Well,
It's like if
yeah.
I can get anything done just by going to the headset mic on my headphones, then I'm gonna do that instead.
I mean, I'm moving into my Moto G6 for a review, and this is all glass, so I have to be very kind to it before I have to send it
Mhm.
back to the PR person.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm missing out on this whatever finish this is, the paint and whatnot. There's a little bit
Yeah,
of glass, but I don't care.
the
Like
Pixel.
that's
I mean, I was very upset with how easily the black Pixel chipped, but man, that felt good going back to more of a
yeah.
matte finish feel in the hand. I was just going back
H
through a bunch of
yeah.
old phones and picked up my Lumia 930. You're like, man, this is a good feeling phone. I miss this. This was a phone that I was excited to handle, and I never had a case on it.
Going back to the U12
Yeah,
Plus for a
we should
second,
probably talk about
Rauf Ali from the YouTube chat, HTC U12 has a dim display. We're talking about Super LCD 6, marking a
it. Mhm.
return to the upgrade cycle for that kind of technology. I'm not sure what is entailed with that, so I'm going to brush up on that. But we have all the support for the standard color gamuts, sRGB, DCI-P3, also supporting HDR10 streaming. So hopefully we see Netflix and YouTube follow suit in supporting the device over there. And yeah, this is
Well, because it is going to be HDR compliant.
yeah.
So I guess I don't know what is the brightness on Super LCD 6.
Yeah, I mean, we can do a quick Google.
I'm trying to look that up right now
Yeah,
too.
Super
You'll
LCD
probably
is a
beat me.
technology mostly used by HTC, but I mean, there's no real kind of thing going on here in terms of, well, who makes it? I mean, and there is some comparison to AMOLED, but
Yeah,
it's kind of an anonymous kind of thing going on,
people are assuming a brightness just somewhere vaguely beyond 600 nits.
which I mean,
Well, that puts it behind the G7. So
definitely, but I'm not sure where in the scale and also I would like to see minimum brightness too, because like
yeah.
this
Oh yeah.
this thing has the Moto Active display, but this is an LCD, the Moto G6, so it has to turn on the whole display in order to deal with that. So yeah, that's it's kind of a bother for that kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't get super. So I prefer AMOLED displays. I just like the contrast ratio and how ridiculously oversaturated the colors get on AMOLED screens. But I haven't been super cranky about picking up LCD screened phones. So I've never really completely understood the people that walk around with an assumption that LCD is garbage. The G7 has actually been a pretty good argument for how you make an LCD display brighter. Like it works for TVs, and yeah, I guess when I'm really looking at like movie content, I can kind of see blacks or dark grays instead of being completely off pixels. But the overall daily phone usage has been great. So as long as I can read an HTC U12 screen in California daylight, then I'm gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. And it'd also bring some other advantages too. Like if we started getting some more of these like super high refresh rate displays, I'd love to see that become more of a trend too. Like that the Razer phone was disappointingly dim, but then when you fire up content with a high refresh rate, like that looks awesome. So I'd love to see if we couldn't combine those two somehow with crazy fast refresh, refresh speeds with super high brightness mode.
I mean, if they get the right supplier for that kind of thing, I don't know. Whoever makes Super LCD might want to look into that. In any case, I'm seeing this number 319 nits being pulled out, which
Seriously?
is kind of, I don't know.
I wonder though. That seems like it would be too low. Yeah, I see the tweet. Goran Petrovic on the PN Weekly hashtag says 319 nits. I would be very surprised if it were that low. I can't believe HTC is going to put out a phone screen that dim. But if I'm wrong, I will likely not acknowledge it.
Yeah. And say that, as long as you don't look at it through freaking daylight or like direct sunlight, it's gonna be fine, people.
Well,
it's gonna be fine, folks.
At 319 nits, that would worry me that it wouldn't even be. It would be very difficult to read in indirect light in daylight outside. That to me would be very concerning if it were really that dim, and it didn't have any kind of burst or high brightness mode when you were using it in auto.
Yeah. So, I mean, they do have some sort of adaptive brightness going on there as part of the their software suite, which is still light as ever. Still kind of just very decent, very plain, I guess. I mean, it's been since Sense 5, but it's been a little bit long in the tooth now. So hopefully see some
getting away from the more garish, HTC and EMUI. LG and EMUI could learn a few things from HTC, walking back the more garish design elements of previous phones. But there's got to be a lot running under the hood if you've got custom hardware like squeeze features and camera processing.
Well, I mean, one thing that I am goddamn grateful for is the 6 gigs of DDR4X RAM standard. Ooh. I mean, that's finally we don't have to freaking deal with 4 gigs on the freaking Galaxy S9 or, I mean, you're paying less for those, but
then also like we always make that like the weird mid. I would really just don't change the performance of the phone for different tiers of the same phone. Just make the storage the deciding factor between like a device that's your entry level gadget, and then you bump it up from 64 to 128 or 256, and that's how you determine how the phones cost. For whatever reason, that makes me super cranky when I see a phone come out. Well, I mean, the base model has 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of storage, and then the nice version has 6 gigs of RAM and 256.
Like even with that more, that much more storage, you're not going to, utilize all of that RAM to be able to have, certain sections of that in instant memory just so that you can do tasks. No, you've been fine with 4 gigs in 128 or 4 gigs in, well, it's not been common with 256, but you get my point. Like that's not something that is really storage dependent.
Or, I mean, it shouldn't be, but for whatever reason, manufacturers tend to link those. So I'm just happy to see that 6 gigs is standard. So we'll say that's
at this price. Of course, it has to be standard.
Right. Well, but I mean, again, What did the Galaxy S9 Plus launch at? This is the phone that they've likely got their
$725, I
no,
believe.
the
Yeah.
S9 Plus didn't
Oh,
launch
S9
it.
Plus, 840.
Right. So for $50 less than an S9 Plus, that's the argument HTC is making. So, you don't need to, at this price, doesn't guarantee you 6 gigs of RAM, as
Totally
Samsung
fair. Totally
has shown in
fair,
the
but
past.
I mean, you have to look at the market that is buying into the larger phone market still. Are we still looking at that same market from 2015 where people tend to favor 6-inch phones for whatever reason, and people are still are
No,
like very happy to see texting
all I'm
thumbs and
saying
whatnot.
is that was another opportunity for HTC to fail, and they managed not to. So all I'm saying is, just because the phone's expensive doesn't mean that the manufacturer knows that those hardware components are going to make a difference to tech enthusiasts.
Pulling at straws here to save HTC. I feel like that they've done pretty okay. I mean, we haven't talked about the translucent blue color because I think well, why have visuals on a freaking audio podcast? But yeah, like people
I
seem
mean,
to be all up in
I
that.
showed the hands-on video. So if you were watching the YouTube live stream of this, then you at least got to see some of Jaime Rivera molesting the U12 Plus. Yeah, yeah, I think this is a fine phone, and really, I'm gonna put this up in the same thing. Like when we had our conversation with Nick a couple weeks back,
Mhm.
we were talking about the G7. The situation isn't, what are they doing? Is it enough? Is it good enough? Do they deserve to get attention? Like that's not the question. This is looking like it's going to be a great phone. It looks like it's going to be a very good phone. I think the biggest problem facing a lot of these manufacturers is that they seem completely unwilling or unable to join a consumer conversation with traditional advertising, with good marketing, and with a consistent approach to telling people about why their products are interesting.
And
We
HTC is
can't.
still in a position where they can't really do that.
And I'm for the life of me, I can't understand why they're going to go after some gimmick with like a celebrity in their commercials. And they will probably have a whole bunch of aspirational marketing, which doesn't really focus on what makes their product different or interesting or fun. And then a week after the phone is actually launched, all of those ads will disappear because they don't want to spend money on ad buys or billboards or magazines or anything like that. And then they'll wonder, like, well, why isn't anyone talking about our phone 2 months after it's launched? And it's because you
it's
aren't
been
talking about your phone 2 months after you launched it.
it's almost been a decade since, speaking of the U
HTCU, yeah.
commercial. Yeah.
Bringing back the all-time best smartphone brand advertising campaign, that they should have been building on that this entire time, and I think they would be a lot more successful, or at least have a bit more consumer mind share than they currently have. You're getting into the third generation of the Pixel, and Google spends a ton keeping the Pixel active in advertising, in marketing. It doesn't just disappear after the phone launches. You see Pixel billboards and Pixel commercials after the phone has been released. Um, I imagine that we're going to see some significant growth in Pixel sales after the first two had some teething pains getting to the market, and consumers are going to see, oh, Google really means it. They're actually sticking around. They're improving upon these things, and you're going to get a lot more goodwill from tech reviewers and enthusiasts there. So when you search for that content, it's going to become a lot more SEO friendly, and everything is going to go their way. HTC keeps disappearing from the conversation. LG keeps disappearing from the conversation, and it gives consumers a reason to ignore them. Like there's no reason to invest in that ecosystem if the manufacturer doesn't look like they have faith in their products.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the question that the whole HTC Google deal has left us with. What will they do with that $1 billion? Will they just leave this behind and focus on the niche blockchain and VR phones that they have planned for us? Or will they actually make a good faith attempt at keeping this thing around into 2019? Time will
Yeah, I
tell.
mean it's a brand on the ropes, and I think everyone has their quick fix solution on what would make HTC compelling again. I think my big argument would be big, be public, get this phone into consumers' hands outside of LA, San Francisco, and New York. Be aggressive in talking about this product in every type of media. I mean, get those ad buys up, expose consumers to this, and then also have your talking points down on what differentiates this from a Galaxy. If you're only, because everyone likes to have this argument like, oh, well, they should have priced it cheaper, then it would win. Like, that never works. If your argument is you should make the product cheaper and then I would buy it, that person was never really going to buy that phone anyway. Not in a way that would have made the company, the manufacturer, a profit, which means that that's unsustainable, that company is eventually going to wither and die. So, you can make a compelling argument. The same thing that happened to Essential. You can make a compelling argument for why a phone costs more. This has been the big win for Google. The Nexus was never going to be a consumer-focused device because consumers were going to look at it, see that it was cheaper, less expensive than the iPhone. Well, that means it's not as good. Making essentially a prettier Nexus, which doesn't really impact the cost of manufacturing the phone to as significant a degree, instantly made that the Google iPhone. And consumers were far more willing to take it seriously as something that could compete against an iPhone. The HTC has all the right stuff. It has all the DNA, and then they just whisper. Like, LG has some really compelling reasons for why you would want to pick up a G7 over a Galaxy S9, but then they just mumble instead of like standing up and saying, here is our thing. If you like this kind of stuff, you should buy it. It just flabbergasting. I do not understand why they're going through multi-billion-dollar corporations are going through making these things and then ignoring that consumers don't know that they exist.
This is horrible. You freaking got people on the whole, freaking hot words and buttons now. And this guy, Mauricio, is like complaining, couldn't you just use the okay Google or hey Siri? Well, like half the time they don't respond to me like that. So, gosh, I mean, I just leave me alone. Leave me alone with my phone and let me use it while I'm at the grocery store.
Light. But yeah, so we're gonna have more coverage, obviously, on the HTC U12 Plus coming up. We have a video up already. You can check out sort of our initial early reactions, some stories about other HTC U12 Plus coverage, including a brief write up on the DxO score that you can check that out too. I might eventually get around to reviewing it. I don't know. It's HTC is becoming a company like Sony where they seem to hold off on certain reviewers and then they just sort of disappear from the conversation again. So again, it's tough to spend time with the phone, really get a feel for what it's like to use it, suggest who the phone might be a good fit for, and by the time you've gone through that whole process, like, the company's already sort of pulled out of that conversation anyway. So that's been a difficult moving target for HTC in some of these conversations also.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to see where that target moves to, and we'll try to hit it as we get into our review process, and hopefully we get some more discourse going on, because I mean, HTC can't do it alone, I guess.
Well, the thing is, they can't rely on us. They need to be doing more themselves. But that's probably as good a place to wrap this up as any. Apologies, because we were kind of talking about trying to get back to a normal schedule for our listener mailbag, but we did want to spend some time talking about that ZTE story right at the top of the show. It kind of pushed our schedule around, so we will get back to that. I promise we will get back to that, because we do have
one more week in May.
We might as well, really kind of focus on that next week. My calendar in my brain is off. For some reason, I thought this was our last. Well,
technically, it's June 1st on Friday next, but I mean, we'll count that as the end of the.
We'll say our end of May mailbag is on June 1st. So yes. Tune in next week, where we're going to go through your viewer submitted questions and comments via the PN Weekly.
Send them in. Send them in, podcast@pocketnow.com.
And
we really
email
want you to see it.
podcast@pocketnow.com. So, folks, this show is over. Another episode of the Pocketnow Weekly has come and gone, but the conversation continues on Twitter, where Jules is at Point Jules, and I'm humbly at Some Gadget Guy. Pocketnow is around the web: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Google+, YouTube, and our home site, pocketnow.com. And if you speak Spanish, you definitely want to check out es.pocketnow.com. And shows like this cannot exist without your support. Sharing the weekly with your friends who love mobile technology and dropping reviews anywhere you can review a podcast help us get some more eyes and ears on the show. Once again, we want to thank this week's sponsor, Stitcher Premium. They're helping us keep the lights on here, but ultimately there would not be a show if it weren't for our listeners and subscribers who have kept us on the air since 2012. The Pocketnow Weekly will be back next week with all kinds of delicious technology goodness, so make sure you tune back in.